Podcast advertising involves brands placing ads within podcast episodes to reach engaged listeners. So in this video, we're going to talk about what podcast advertising is, its key benefits, and how you can effectively use it in your own marketing strategy. Podcast advertising is a form of audio advertising where brands will place audio ads inside of podcast episodes. These can either be in audio-only form or, if it's on YouTube, in video form as well. They can typically be placed at the beginning, the middle, or the end of an episode and are designed to reach the ideal listener or customer demographic for that brand because there's an alignment with that particular show. And there's different ways of executing this strategy, but at a high level, the goal is the same as any other advertising campaign. You want to reach a very specific type of person. You want to reach them with a message that's going to resonate with them, that's also going to align them to your brand, whether it's direct performance, where you want to drive them to a website to measure conversion, or it's an awareness campaign where you just want them to know more about you. So in the future, they're more aligned with your brand and more likely to choose you over a competitor. So why do brands choose to advertise on podcasts? The number one reason is engagement, and the number two reason is trust. With the world of social media and the internet and attention spans dropping to below that of a goldfish, it seems nowadays, it's very hard to reach people with a very specific message and cut through the noise. And that's where podcasting really stands out. Because people are typically consuming podcasts either while they're driving somewhere, working out, doing chores around the house, and they have that person in their ear and they're listening to what that conversation is. And so when you can place an ad directly inside of somebody's ear, where they're not distracted with a bunch of other stuff on a screen and they're just listening to the ad as it plays, you have a much higher likelihood that they're not only going to remember what it is, but also have a positive response to it. In marketing speak, they're more likely to buy stuff from you. The other part of this trust is that when you can take advantage of host-read ads, where the podcast host themselves is reading the promotion for your business or your brand, that person assigns more trust to you because they trust the host. That podcast host has become a close friend, a trusted advisor, somebody they go to when they want to learn something very specific. And so if that person has curated all the opportunities they have to accept brand deals and have chosen your brand to put in front of their listeners, because of that relationship, are going to trust that that recommendation is coming from a good place with their own interests in mind. So often you're trying to reach consumers and they have all these walls up in front of them because they know they're trying to be sold to. Reaching out to them through their favorite podcast host is a great way to bring those walls down and make them more receptive to the message you want to reach them with. There are three primary ways that brands can advertise inside of podcasts. The first one that we just talked about is host-read advertisements. That's where you provide a script or an outline to the podcast host, and they read from that as inspiration to promote your product or service inside of the podcast episode itself. You can do that baked in, meaning it's a part of the episode and will always be a part of the episode, or you can do that as a pre-recorded segment from the podcast host that is dynamically inserted, so that way they can rotate out ads as they get stale, or if you have a long-standing arrangement with that podcast host, you can provide them with new creative to create new ads to reach their audience and backfill against their back catalog. The third way that you can advertise inside of a podcast is with dynamic ad insertion, specifically through programmatic ad advertising. Programmatic ad advertising, that's like saying ATM machine. Anyways, the way that this works is that you create your own audio ad, whether it's 30 seconds or 60 seconds, in the same way that you would create an ad for radio, and you would dynamically insert it inside of podcasts that have accepted that inventory. So you would say, I want to promote my brand inside of comedy podcasts. Here's my 30-second ad that I have promoted, and then it will run inside of those podcasts. You don't get the benefits of the podcast host reading your ad for you, but it does give you a lot of scale very quickly because you can insert that same ad in multiple podcasts, and you can do it and measure the results in real time. You lose some of the trust factor, you lose some of the stickiness, but you can reach scale a lot faster. There are three primary places where you will typically hear ads inside of a podcast episode. The first place is a pre-roll ad placement. This is an ad that plays before the episode even starts, right at second number one. This is valuable because when somebody clicks play to listen to an episode, you know they're going to hear the ad. You know the impression is going to be there because they have to hear that ad in order to get to the episode content. Now, if they're in an app that allows them to skip ahead and they don't want to listen to the ad, they can skip ahead, and that's totally fine. You want to reach the people that are actually interested in your content, so that's nothing to worry about. The second place where you'll hear a podcast ad is inside the podcast episode itself, somewhere in the middle. Sometimes there's a couple of these spots, and these are called mid-roll ad placements. So this is an ad in the middle of the podcast episode. And then the final place is the post-roll ad. This happens at the very end of the episode. Not many people choose to advertise in post-roll because you're gonna get some drop-off from people stopping listening to the episode in the middle. So even though if you buy all those placements, not everybody's gonna hear it unless you have some ad verification technology baked in so you can verify the impressions as they come in. And so it's typically the cheapest inventory available to you. Is there value there? For sure, depending on the price. Typically mid-roll and pre-roll are gonna be more expensive, and post-roll will be the cheapest placement because of that reason. Now let's talk about how to actually purchase podcast ads. The first one is a direct sponsorship. This is where you reach out to the podcaster themselves specifically and say, I want to advertise on your podcast. This is really great for a brand because then you have a direct relationship with the creator. You can have more input and more collaboration on what that creative integration looks like. And hopefully, if you identify a really good fit where their audience responds to your advertisements, you're seeing measurable results, the podcaster's happy, you can create a long-term relationship with them, and you're not always having to be churning out podcasts trying to find ones that are a good fit. Because once you find those winners, you want to ride them for as long as you possibly can. Because there's a lot of administrative and back and forth and things that you have to do in order to make that work. So once you have that trusted podcast host that's delivering great results for you, make sure that you stick with them. And this is typically where smaller brands will start. They'll reach out to podcasters that may not be the most popular in their category, but they have a large enough audience that's going to be worth it for the advertiser to reach their listeners. The second place you can buy ads is on programmatic buying platforms. This is where podcasters will make ad slots available within their episodes, and you can go in and buy at a category level the types of placements that you want to see. You can typically target based on listener demographics, though the verification is kind of hit or miss depending on what platform they're listening on. A lot of podcast apps are anonymous as far as the data that you get on the listener, so it's more of an estimated guess, but you can definitely target based on categories like true crime or news or education or things like that. And then the third place that you can look to buy podcast ads is podcast networks. The great thing about this is you kind of get the benefits of working directly with a podcaster and a little bit of the scale of the programmatic because you can potentially reach a lot of people on a lot of podcasts through one relationship. And so if you approached a podcast network like Barstool Sports and said, we want to run advertisements across all of your podcasts, and they say have 50 of them, you just develop one relationship with one person or a group of ad reps, and then they work with you on the creative, integrating into all their shows and all their podcasts, and you reach a lot of listeners with one strategic relationship. And so whether you go directly to the podcaster, whether you go through a programmatic ad buying platform, or if you go to a podcast network, each of them have their merits, and it ultimately comes down to you to decide which one is going to be the best for you. So hopefully that gave you some really tangible ideas of how you can integrate podcast advertising into your strategy for your brand in 2026, giving you some tangible next steps for things to consider as far as how to go about it, which strategies might make sense for you. If you want to learn more about the world of podcast advertising, which specific platforms we recommend, ad rates, things like that, you can read our full blog at audienselift.com/blog. I'll also leave a link to the blog post in the description below for you to click over and read the full article.